Hi everybody, it's Dan. I recently found the notation from a couple of over-the-board games I've played in recent months, and I thought I would take a closer look at them and share them. I'm going to go through them in the chronological order in which they were played, and this one here is the first of the three, played sometime in November of 2013. I was white, my opponent was black, and we get into the Sicilian, more specifically the closed Sicilian, denoted by knight to c3. This is an opening where I've only kind of glanced at the book lines and haven't really studied them in depth, but I do know that the closed Sicilian tends to be quieter than the open Sicilian, and that's what I was looking for here. Unfortunately, my lack of book knowledge here did get me into a little bit of trouble, as pretty soon black was able to equalize after I played pawn to f4. In fact, from this point on, black is able to retain a slight advantage for a good part of the game. This move goes into what I believe is called the Grand Prix attack. However, according to the computer, in this position after f4, black is equal. So a better move would have been bishop to b5, putting indirect pressure on black's center and developing a piece. Just something for me to keep in mind for future games. Anyway, after I play f4, we have e6, my knight develops, and black gets in d5. A second mistake I make out of the opening is capturing here. While normally I believe white should take on d5 in most Sicilian openings, the computer still really liked bishop to b5 here, maintaining the tension in the center. If the pawn pushes forward, white can damage the pawn structure and then retreat the knight to e2, from where he puts pressure on d4 and has access to the king side, which is where I probably should be looking to play since I have more space on that side of the board. But we didn't have that. Instead, I go in for the immediate exchange of pawns in the center, but now his c and d pawns are quite prominent, and he has the initiative because of this. From here I play d4. We both get in some more development, placing our knights into pins. I castle, and he captures on d4. I recapture with my queen safe since the knight is in a pin. Black develops a bit more, and I hop my knight into e5. Black counters the pressure on c6 by dropping the bishop back, and now that the pin is broken, I have to do something about my queen's placement. In the game, I go forward with the exchange of knights, but that allows him to restore his c-pawn, which makes his center control even better. That's why at this point I think it would have been better simply for me to drop the queen back to d3, leaving him with an isolated queen pawn. But again, that is not the route that we go down in this game. After the pawn recaptures, I have to retreat my bishop, and I choose d3 to keep pressure on his eventual castle position. He does castle, and here I start kind of needlessly crawling into a ball. I know that c5 is coming, and I wanted to avoid it coming with tempo, so I retreat the queen. This gives black even more of the initiative, and a distinct advantage for a while. What would have been better here is actually knight to a4, which would stop c5. Queen a5 can be played, followed by bishop to b2. The bishop actually is immune from capture, since if the queen does take it, there's a discovered attack, and black is lost. So instead of falling for that tactic, black here can still play c5, and after the queens are exchanged, pawn to b3 protects the knight, which is currently kind of stranded on the side of the board. And while the knight is not too great right now, neither is black's pawn structure, with double isolated pawns on the d-file, and I have a 3-to-1 majority on the queen side. It might be tempting to take the knight and ruin that pawn structure, but I don't think that would be a good idea here, since black would be giving up the bishop pair, and that's perhaps especially a bad idea since it would mean exchanging a perfectly good bishop with lots of possibilities for a bad knight that is currently stranded on the side of the board. So in short, this position would have been more playable than the one we got into the game, which comes about after this position here when I retreat the bishop and then I voluntarily retreat the queen to f2. After the queen retreat, c5 still gets played, pushing into the center. Another option would have been knight to g4 with tempo on the queen, but c5 here is good as well. I develop my bishop, black develops the queen, and we both position our rooks on the e-file. Maybe one thing to note here is that I move my A rook to the E file, meaning my heavy pieces are more centralized than black's. From here, I play rook to E5, which on the surface looks like a really bad move, since black has the reply, which he did play in the game, of knight to G4 with a fork. But actually, this could have turned out not too badly for me. If queen to F3 is played, white can go down the exchange, but actually has pretty good piece activity for compensation. Computer evaluation still scores black better, but it's actually only half a point of material. So positional play here would be the counterweight to being down material. There are just a couple of things I wanted to point out about this position if it did come about. Trying to put white in this pin to get more material does not work out, and in fact only leads to black losing material instead, and now suddenly white is winning. And alternatively, and if this position did come about, the queen going pawn hunting wouldn't work out either. The pressure on the f-file needs to be kept in mind, and if queen captures on b2, we have queen captures f7 check, followed by bishop to c3, and that's game over. Black loses either the queen or the king. So again, an interesting position I think is this one, where an advantage in force would be countered by an advantage in position. However, again, that is not the path we go down in the game. Instead, after the fork with the knight on g4, I counter with an attack on the queen, grabbing a pawn in the process. And we enter this position here, where again, something like piece activity and my knight on d5 and my healthier pawn structure on the queen side counters being down a pawn of material. As in other positions we've looked at, the computer scores black with a slight half-point advantage, but nothing crushing. However, in this position right here, kind of the last meaningful move of the game is played. If you'd like to, see if you can find the best move for black. It's not anything too complicated at all, but unfortunately for my opponent, and fortunately for me, he missed it entirely. In the game, he played h6, which is difficult for me to explain since there's no back rank threats in this position. We talked after the game, and he said he just completely missed my response of knight to c7, hitting the fork on the rooks. The move instead in this position for black to play is bishop to d8, keeping the bishop pair and guarding c7. But in the game, after I hit the fork, now all of a sudden white is slightly better because now the exchange will be won back and white will have an extra pawn to boot. Now, interestingly, after hitting the fork, white's advantage is not much more than half a point, just as black's was before. However, talking with my opponent after this game, he admitted that mentally, being hit with a fork just took the wind right out of him, and we'll see in a moment that he makes a few more slips, which just result in his position crumbling. So black here pushes a6, and I take the rook that is farthest from the center in order to bring the remaining rook away from the center as well. Then I put additional pressure on f7, but this is the first slip I was talking about, because my opponent completely misses the pressure. He plays bishop to b5, hoping I will recapture and he'll have at least connected pawns. But instead, I crash through on f7. And from here on for the rest of the game, I have a decisive advantage that I convert into a win. There isn't too much more to say from this point on, so I'll go through the remainder of the game quickly. The king moves, and I play c4, attacking the bishop. He plays to c6, and now I'm the one trying to get a connected passed pawn in the center by offering a bishop exchange. Instead of going for that, he protects the bishop, but this allows me to get my rook to the 7th rank. Now he exchanges bishops, and here is his second and final slip. After he moves the king over, the bishop falls, and basically the rest of the game is just white cleaning up a bit, picking off pawns. Everything is held together by my bishop, and I just work on getting my pawns up. We play on a bit more until we get into this position here, where after we get to this position, now my opponent resigns. So that was the game. Going through it with the computer, it was interesting to see the computer's analysis of the positions. I remember playing this game and being very pessimistic about my chances until I got the fork on c7. but it was quite heartening to see that the computer liked my positional play in some lines. I hope to carry that forward into my other games. I know that when I play, I am not the world's most confident player when I think I'm in a losing position, but after looking at this game, I'm going to have to try to maintain objectivity and positive thinking, because sometimes it's not as bad as it all seems. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Any questions or comments are welcome, as well as ratings. Take care. Bye.